The stock market over here had a massive correction to the downside, and this indicator over here is exactly going to predict where the Bitcoin price is going to go. And guess what? It is going to quite surprise you, because guess what? Even though the Bitcoin price here had a quite reasonable mover to the downside, it doesn't really look that bad. And this chart and this chart over here as well are actually confirming that it's very possible Bitcoin is about to become a safe haven, and the Bitcoin price is about to skyrocket onto the upside here based on the news that I've seen here in the last couple of days. And basically, what has been happening here in the last couple of days? Why did the stock market have a correction? Well, I talked about it here in the last video. Just to have a quick recap. Basically, the new president wants companies to move into the US and start manufacturing into the US. So what he's doing is he's putting a lot of tariffs on all these other countries like China, which are manufacturing much cheaper because of lower wages. And that way, what they're actually trying to do is trying to get manufacturing back here into the US. And the Chinese are saying, well, we don't really actually like that. We don't like the fact you're putting tariffs on us as a country, so we're putting tariffs back on you. And now the US is putting tariffs back on China. So it's just a real trade war going on. And stocks do not like uncertainty. They're a big mover to the downside, and Bitcoin tends to follow stocks as well. And generally speaking, also uncertainty, Bitcoin tends to dump here to the downside. If I go back here to March of 2020, over here, on this bigger chart, you can actually see here over here during this crash. Of course, we all knew because of the virus here, where the big crash to the downside, but we actually see that the Federal Reserve came in and they saved the market. And this was over here around $4,000 when I bought a bunch of Bitcoin over here. And since then, I mean, look at this. We had this massive move here to the upside. And this was all because the Federal Reserve, of course, started to intervene. Now, it's very likely if the stock market will continue to move to the downside and bond yields will continue to spiral out of control as they are currently doing. If I look at the 30 yield, for example, it is very likely, of course, the Federal Reserve will come in and save the day as they always will. And this is, of course, going to be hyper bullish for Bitcoin. And in my opinion, if I look, for example, here at the dollar index, which already had a mover to the downside, which is very logical because the US wants to, again, probably get the dollar value to lower because he wants to export, so he needs a lower dollar for that. And we always know from in the past here, the 2020 bull run, 2021 bull run over here happened exactly here when the dollar as well was declining. And here back in 2017 as well, when the dollar was declining, we also saw a significant rally for Bitcoin. And if I look at gold, and people tend to call Bitcoin digital gold, we're seeing that gold currently has a very nice move to the upside, holding up very strongly as well. So in my opinion, I think that if I look at generally speaking, Bitcoin tends to follow gold, it tends to follow the dollar index. I think this chart is currently setting up here for a significant move here for Bitcoin as well, once things clear up a little bit. I mean, the Bitcoin price held up absolutely fantastic. So I think once things start to revert a little bit, or the Federal Reserve comes in and they actually start saving the market, then it's very likely Bitcoin is going to absolutely fly. As well, if we look at the funding rate, for example, we can see funding rate is very negative. We've seen periods before where funding rate was so negative here in the last couple of months. We, of course, saw it here during the bear markets. That's logical. But during this bull run, we have seen whenever the funding rate tended to dip over here, we always saw a move that followed over here to the upside. So we're still in the negative funding rate, but every time this happened, we saw a significant move to the upside for Bitcoin. Now, of course, if things start to deteriorate and the stock market is going to continue to crash, or some major news happens, Bitcoin also doesn't like uncertainty. But as long as we of course have the Federal Reserve, they will probably save the market. And I think very likely things will start to resolve a little bit. I mean, I got friends which are all talking about this and they're all stressing out about this, but I think things will resolve eventually. And always we have the Federal Reserve as backup, which will start to print a bunch of money because, well, the world economy is a Ponzi anyway. So I don't think the governments really want to destroy that. It's probably much easier to keep it alive and push it to the next president or next generation. But that's a story for another video. But anyway, a little bit of a downtrend here for Bitcoin, looking here to, if it's going to break, probably continue to rally here to the upside. I mean, Bitcoin holding up very nicely, so I'm very happy here with Bitcoin. Currently, going here to the news, Bitcoin 2025, we can actually see that David Sachs here, the crypto czar, is going to speak at Bitcoin 2025. So we also have to actually remember, we still have a lot of support here from the president. So I will probably what I'm going to do personally, just wait a little bit out here in the coming few days what's going to happen. But I'm quite certain it's not going to be looking that bad. And if we do crash, I think the Federal Reserve will come in and save the day. And in that case, we're probably going to fly much higher. Reminds me a little bit of 2020, very similar sentiment. But I think if we're just going to let it play out a little bit, things are going to improve. Things that are not improving over here, this is actually here Ethereum. Ethereum and Bitcoin value has almost wiped out about 10 years here in gains. Ethereum here in Bitcoin value here is almost about to break here the low, setting back here the price to what it was here back here in 2017 or at the end of 2016. So about 9 years over here of gains completely lost. It is about to break here the bottom. I've warned about Ethereum in many of my videos, warned about holding it, told my friends to get out of it. And if you're still holding it, I mean, to be honest, I can understand some people want to experiment here, but of course it's not a long-term store of value, and we're seeing it failing right now. Looking at some of these other altcoins, Solana is very, very low, and XRP is also looking here. It's about to dump, but XRP, if you zoom it out in the long term, is also in a very strong bear market here against Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is holding up very, very strongly, which is as well very, very bullish actually for Bitcoin, because it means that the bull market isn't over yet. We're seeing Van Eck here says that Bitcoin tariffs the present tariffs are accelerating Bitcoin's role in global finance. Countries like China, Russia are really settling energy trades in Bitcoin. And I think what we have to understand, guys, is that we have a very pro-Bitcoin president out there. So somewhere in his plan, he's probably going to start to implement Bitcoin as well here into some of his ideas. So I think we just should have a little bit of patience. Let's see what the president's going to come up with. But we see how much power the president has here in moving markets. So why can't he do that here for Bitcoin? Because he's very, very positive here about Bitcoin. So just let it play out here, guys, a little bit. Don't worry too much. Focus more on the incentives. Focus less on what the price is saying. Going here to Arthur Hayes, he's saying if the Fed, then the PBOC will give us Yaxi. Well, basically what he's saying is that if the Chinese yuan is devaluing, then capital, the Chinese are buying Bitcoin. And we see this quite a lot, but I would actually say here, you can see a very similar scenario here back in 2017, back in 2021, when the dollar tends to devalue, but when currencies tend to devalue, people tend to fly here into Bitcoin. And I'm not entirely sure if the Chinese are going to be able to push the Bitcoin price up all by themselves. I don't know how much the Chinese are actually interested into Bitcoin. And also, the Chinese currency is very, very weak. And the wages in China are quite low compared to the US. So I don't necessarily know how far the Chinese can actually push it up. But yeah, if we do see a yuan continuing to devalue, then very likely money is going to flow into Bitcoin as well. But what I would mostly worry about here is the DXY. I mean, if this starts breaking the lows here as the president actually wants, the president is going to be happy. Maybe he can start removing some tariffs, and then it's also going to set up here the Bitcoin price to set a big, big bull run. So yeah, I'm not super bearish here on Bitcoin at all. This conclusion is probably just wait it out there a little bit. I think it's probably going to resolve a little bit. And if we do dump, we also have the Fed who will back us up. But so far, we're holding up quite nicely. So gold rallies. So I think we can probably start to follow gold. Let's see. But not too worried. So just enjoy your time. Enjoy your day. And that one ends the video. Hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye bye.